after I have departed, do not revert back to kufr. Do not revert back to disbelief. This is literal translation. What does Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam equate with kufr, with going back to disbelief? Interestingly, in the earlier part of this khutbah, Allah's Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam already mentioned that shaitan has lost hope. The mafhum or the crux of what he said shaitan has lost hope in causing you people to revert back to idol worship. Sahaba, prior to Islam, prior to the coming of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they were mushrik, kafir. What type of kufr? They would worship idols. So such tawheed, such oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah ta'ala used Rasul Pak sallallahu alaihi wasallam to introduce among Sahaba kiram that Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam places a seal on their iman, on their tawheed in the Hajjatul Wada. And he says that shaitan also has lost hope. He will not be able to take you back to idol worship. So what is the kufr that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is referring to? When he says to Sahaba at the latter part of that khutbah, that la tarji'u ba'di kuffara, that do not revert or do not return back to kufr after I have left you. Yadribu ba'dukum riqaba ba'd, where one of you or some amongst you strike the neck of others amongst you. In other words, you start fighting with one another. And this fighting leads to killing of one another. Allah's Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, do not return back to kufr by killing one another and by fighting with one another. The first thing which we, obviously in many other ahadith with similar content have discussed, that what is meant by this kufr? Does it mean that if the ummah starts fighting with one another or killing one another, that they have, na'uzubillah, literally become kafir? To this, ulama ikram explain, one explanation they say, that if one Muslim has to kill another and he considers that act of aggression to be permissible, he regards the blood of another Muslim as halal, permissible for him, then in that instance, he will have become a kafir, because he is going directly against Quran and Hadith. So, if he regards it to be permissible, the other explanation ulama ikram give, that when you will start fighting with one another, such behavior of a Muslim will eventually lead to kufr. And not only to kufr, it will lead to what we call mitat as-su. It will lead to an evil death. A third explanation ulama ikram give of this, if you take this hadith literally, it means, they say that don't behave like a kafir. Don't behave like the kuffar. The kuffar regard it as okay to kill one another and to attack one another. As a Muslim, it does not behove you to behave in such a manner. Another explanation which ulama kiram give of this is that the Arabic word kafara, kaf, fa, ra, literally another meaning of it is to be ungrateful. In other words, kufran and ni'mat, to negate or to not appreciate the ni'mat, the bounty of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And what greater bounty can there be than the ni'mat of iman? Allah has blessed you with ni'mat of iman. Value the ni'mat of iman by valuing the dignity, life and property of your fellow Muslim. If you will regard this as halal, you will regard it as permissible to attack another Muslim, this is the height of ingratitude. This is kufr, literal kufr. Ingratitude for the great ni'mat and bounty of iman which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed you. Unfortunately, we find, my respected brothers, religious intolerance. This inability of us, particularly when it comes to disputes, or if we disagree with Muslims on certain grounds, in many instances we find that the level of intolerance leads towards strife, leads towards disunity, and in many instances leads to one group of Muslims attacking and na'uzubillah killing another group of Muslims. This is something that really hurt Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. If we study the seerah and we study the life of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the extent he went to preserve the unity of the ummah. There were munafiqeen, there were people of kufr amongst them, pretending to be Muslims. Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam knew who they were, yet he did not name them in his life. Why? Preserve the unity of the ummah. This is something that was very, very close to the heart of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So we have to be very, very careful. Keep this parting advice of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in front of us, and never ever become the cause of discord, of disunity, of the ummah breaking up into different groups and factions. Have sabr, have bardash, have tolerance, have allowance in the heart. It does not mean compromise the principles of deen, but don't become one who starts fighting with others. Don't become one who sows the seed of discord and disunity. Keep this in front of us. In his final Hajj, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam exhorted his ummah, La tarji'u ba'di kuffara. Do not go back towards kufr by fighting with one another and by striking at one another. Allah give us tawfiq.